Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. Big thanks to all of our sponsors around here, including our friends at Fadley's downtown with the crab cakes and the delicious mac and cheese. They ship that anywhere in the world, one click away. Also, our friends over at State Fair with the chicken and waffles. And across the street now with El Guapo doing the Añejo, the Silver, and the Resposado. I'm going to get over for some tequila. We got to get the weather better. We got to get the shot, the mask, and all that. Don Moeller came to me this week and said, we need to mix a little sports, a little Baltimore Positive, a little hoops, with maybe a little bit of vaccine, with a little bit of Anthem, with a little bit of golf. Very important because Moeller's about to move Baltimore Positive for his golf game. Don, you've requested that John Feinstein joins us again and always in the news. John, I know we're all sort of waiting in line to get our shot, do our thing. You're in our state. How are you? First and foremost, it's been such a weird time not seeing you at UMBC games and Maryland games this year.
Yeah, it's been weird for me. I've done several UMBC games on TV, but the arena's empty. The maximum number of people allowed in the building is 100, including players and coaches, and we have to sit upstairs at the top level of the lower bowl of the arena, which is not the same as being down there courtside, of course. But I'm glad that I've been able to get out to some games and not been totally watching on TV. But it's been a strange year. Let's for a million reasons, but most of it starts with the pandemic. I'm grateful now we at least have a real president in the White House. That's a good start. But I'm like you, waiting for a chance to get my shot. My wife's a teacher, so she got hers. And I'm hoping to get one fairly soon. But knock wood, so far I've been completely healthy.
Well, you're up Don's alley because Don lives in Catonsville, so you drive into Catonsville. Dr. Rabowski's been a frequent guest here as well. I mean, talk about the shame of all shames. They wait all that time to get that building built, right? And we can't gather at this point, right? Like, that was not why the building was built over there in Catonsville.
Yeah, Freeman Rabowski is on a very short list of college presidents I admire. Most college presidents to me are nothing but glorified fundraisers who love to remind you that they might have a PhD. My mother got her PhD while raising 3 children. And that's an accomplishment, no doubt about it. But she always liked people to call her Bernice. She never asked to be called Dr. Feinstein. But Dr. Rabowski, as you said, is someone I respect greatly. They built that beautiful building. $95 million. I was there the day they opened it in 2018, which was also the year that UMBC pulled the massive upset over Virginia. And you could see the crowds kind of steadily growing the last 2 years as people got used to the fact that UMBC was a good team consistently under Ryan Odom, as they have been. And now, like you said, here's UMBC tied for first place. They're playing 2 games, one today, one tomorrow, that'll decide the regular season champion in the America East. And nobody can go. And it really is a shame. It's a shame across all sports, of course. But as someone who's been involved with the UMBC program for the last 5 years, I miss fans. I never thought I would say that, but I miss seeing fans at games when I am at games, whether it's UMBC or VCU or wherever I might go for a game. I realize now how much I miss the fans.
It sort of feels like everything's missing when the fans are, especially from a collegiate event.
Yeah, and also the bands. The bands, the bands are big. Down at VCU, they have one of the best bands in the country, the Peppas. George Mason has a great band. I did a game there last month, no band.
Let Morgan in. Don't throw more. We got local here. Come on now.
There are a lot of local schools. I'll tell you a quick story. When my son was about 5 or 6 years old, I took him to a game at Howard, and Howard was playing Florida A&M, and both bands were there. And at every time out, the bands would get up and play against each other, sort of. And finally, my son Danny, who's a big music guy, never a sports guy, turns to me and says, "Dad, I want to go to college here." And I said, "That's great, because I can get you in here as a minority."
That's true. A little financial aid there. That will work.
John,
before we jump on to other very timely topics, since Nestor bought up UMBC down the street from my house here and your love of it, Ryan's not going to be there very long, right?
We've been saying almost since Ryan's second year, which was the year they, again, went to the NCAAs and upset Virginia. Somebody's going to hire him here. But to Ryan's credit, he hasn't jumped at the first job that's come along. he loves it at UMBC. He loves the school. He loves Dr. Rabowski. His family lives in Annapolis. They love it there. Ryan will leave eventually. Yes, he's too good a coach not to move up to the next level, whatever or wherever that is. But I think it's great that he stayed for 5 years. Maybe this is Ryan calling me.
Maybe it's President Biden.
Saying, yeah. Well, I would dump you guys for him.
John, it is a nomadic existence, though, right? Like, you can be searching that next job and move your family 5 times. We see it in football all the time, right? You know, when you have the ability to sort of wait it out for the one job, right? Like
That's what he's been doing. I don't think you're right, Nestor. I don't think he wants to change jobs 3 times. I think wherever he goes next, he probably wants that to be his last job, a place where he can establish a legacy the way he has at UMBC. But he's not going to jump. There was a job open in the Atlantic 10 a couple of years ago. And they asked him to interview. And the day before the interview, the headhunter, and why they have headhunters involved in coaching searches, I do not know, but sent him, you know, kind of an offer sheet. This is what you're going to be offered if you're offered the job. And Ryan looked at it, and it wasn't so much that the money wasn't that much better, because he's well paid at UMBC. It was that the basketball budget was less than he had at UMBC in a higher league. And he canceled the interview. He didn't even bother to go through with the interview. He said, why would I do this? Why would I make that move? So Ryan's smart. Ryan's patient. Of course, he's the son of a coach. And when the time comes to move, he'll know it. It won't be a maybe should I do it. It won't be one of those things where he calls me, because we're pretty close, and says, what do you think? He'll just do it.
He's such – I mean, you know this since you know him well. I don't know him well. I've met him obviously through my job in the county, and particularly that magical year. But my grandsons have been to events, games, camps over there, and he connects with little kids. I like to judge people by how they connect. You mentioned your mom wanted to be Bernice. I want to judge people the way.
By the way, this is where I got to say, I learned in the middle of the program here, after 40 years, Moeller is a doctor. So I just want to say that. You are Dr. Moeller, even though I call you Don or DI sometimes.
Right. I'm with John. I don't make people call me doctor. But you know, my grandsons loved Ryan. And when he's talking to them, just the way when Joe Biden was speaking to that little girl recently at a town hall, there's no phoniness about Ryan when he's talking to them about basketball and where they are and what position they're. He's the real deal, right? And you pull for a guy like that.
Ryan's a father of 3, so that's certainly a factor. But the other thing you have to remember is he grew up around basketball coaches because of his dad. And he knew the ones he liked and admired the most were the ones who treated him well when he was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, even though technically, you know, he wasn't important, quote unquote. And he wants to be the same way. He wants to be that guy. And I think his parents taught him well, and he's learned well on his own. So you're right, Don. I agree with that.
Well, you really see it. It comes through in spades. Well, John, I called Nestor the other day. I'm reading the Washington Post. And boom, your article jumps off at me about the Star-Spangled Banner. I immediately texted Nestor. I said, come on, reach out to John. This topic and the way he frames it is terrific. And again, I want to say to folks, go out, Google John Feinstein, Star-Spangled Banner, read the article. First of all, before I get into the article, have you gotten a lot of hate mail?
You know, it's interesting because not as much as I expected, Don. I mean, I thought that, you know, they're always going to be the knee-jerk Trump-like right-wingers who say love it or leave it, and if you don't respect our flag, you should just leave the country. But I tried to make the point that I am the son of an Army veteran. I always stand for the national anthem, the same way that Mark Cuban said he always stands for the national anthem. But I was making 2 points. One, just because I stand for the national anthem. My dad said this to me when I was a little kid. I went to a Knicks game during the Vietnam War when I was about 10 years old. And there were 4 African-American men sitting right down the row from where we were who didn't stand for the anthem. I honestly thought the law said you had to stand for the anthem at that point. I was 10 years old. I didn't understand it. I'd never seen anybody not stand. So I went home and asked my dad about it that night. As I said, my dad fought in World War II. And I said, what's that about? And he said, look, there are some people in this country who don't feel that flag represents them. And it's understandable. This is in the middle of the civil rights movement, why there are people who feel that way. He said, John, I hope you will always stand for the national anthem. But if somebody next to you isn't, you should respect their right to do that. You should respect their right to feel however it is that they feel that causes them not to stand. And I began the column, as you know, Don, by pointing out that when my dad ran the Washington Opera, he would have the orchestra play the national anthem on opening night before the opera began. The conductor would just walk into the orchestra pit, put up his baton, and the orchestra would play the anthem, and everybody would just get to their feet. There was nobody saying, stand to honor America. Nobody saying, take your caps off. Not many caps in an opera house, but you know what I mean. And everybody would stand. But he only did it once a year. He didn't do it before every opera. He didn't do it before every performance. And my point was, let's make the anthem a special occasion again. It's not special. We all go to games, and you look around, and half the people are talking to one another, or they're on their cell phones, or they're not paying any attention. Or nowadays, a lot of people time the anthem because so many people stretch it out. It should be played in about 1 minute and 10 seconds. At the Super Bowl, the two people who sang it took 2 minutes and 30 seconds. After a while, you're like, come on, let's move on. But my point is, play it at the Super Bowl. You don't have to play America the Beautiful. Just play the anthem. Play it at the World Series. Play it at the Final Four. Play it on the 4th of July. Play it on opening day in baseball. Whatever, special occasions. And that way it is special. I mean, when I go to the Army-Navy game and they play the national anthem, and I look to my right at 4,000 cadets, my left at 4,000 midshipmen, and I see all 8,000 of them snap to salute position when the anthem begins and stay there, I get chills. I've heard the song thousands of times, but when I see that every year, I get chills. So let's get back to the point where when they play the anthem, we get chills.
Well, what about sports and the flag, just sort of how it's been usurped?
Yeah.
After 9/11, baseball stops games in the 7th inning and sings God. To me, I remember the Ray Charles at our first Super Bowl, doing America the Beautiful. There were 3 or 4 different versions of America before a Super Bowl game. But just the fact that sports is now taking flyovers,
right.
Just all of this over the last 30 years. And, John, it's personal for me because I was over in London when the Ravens took the knee, and it really changed my life. I mean, it's why we're doing Baltimore Positive now, the backside of everything that happened. I mean, I took C.J. Mosley out to do a show 2 weeks after that, and no one came. Literally, no one came. And, and certainly the Ravens, and I know you're very involved, having written a book on the Ravens, everything that Dick Cass, Kevin Byrne, Harbaugh, the whole organization dealt with in the aftermath of that. It is a powerful topic, is it not?
Well, one of the things I said in the column is it might be in a country that is completely polarized at this point, as we've seen since the election. It may be the most polarizing issue because everybody has an opinion on the anthem. Nobody's neutral on it. And you talk about the Ravens. I remember being at M&T Bank Stadium the following week when they played the Steelers, and there'd been a lot of talk inside the team about, okay, how do we deal with this issue? Because after Trump's rant, the London game was 2 days after Trump's rant about, fire the SOBs, that whole thing. How do we deal with this as a team? Black guys, white guys, how do we deal with this? And they finally decided, and you were there, to take a knee together, the whole team, before the anthem started. And then when the anthem started, they all stood up, locked arms, but they were all standing for the anthem. They all got booed. Almost the entire stadium booed.
John, I ran into Dick because I had seen Dick in London, ashen-faced. 6 days later, they're playing here against – it was the Steelers, I believe. And I ran into him literally going in the stairwell. And he said, hey, we're going to do something really special today. It's going to be awesome. It's going to make things better. And then 20 minutes later, that happened. And right. I thought, oh, my God. Right. He was bragging on – their reaction, and it did not go well.
I think their thought was, again, and the players talked to Dick, to Kevin Byrne, to John Harbaugh, to Ozzie Newsome. I think the thought was, okay, we're going to make the point that we're united on this issue, but we're not going to offend anybody because we will stand during the anthem. And that wasn't good enough for most of the fans in that stadium, most of whom were white, as you know, and it's not unique to Baltimore by any stretch. But the fact is the anthem is polarizing. And what I get upset about is when people say the players should keep politics out of sports. Well, you know what? Playing the anthem is a political statement too. And rolling out a giant flag is a political statement. And a flyover is, it's all politics. It just depends on which side you fall on.
But and also Jerry Jones saying, "I'll fire you if you don't."
Yeah, exactly. And again, that smacks. And Bob McNair saying the thing about we can't let the inmates run the prison, the late Bob McNair in Houston. But that smacks of, that these are gladiators or the owners are plantation owners, whatever. You might not remember this, but in 1968, and I've been studying this because I'm writing a book on race and sports right now, but when Tommy Smith and John Carlos did their Black Power salute, or they prefer to call it a human rights salute, but when they did the salute on the medal stand, Brent Musburger was a columnist in Chicago at the time. And in his column, he called them black-skinned stormtroopers. And among other things, said, how dare they embarrass the country that's paying their tab to be in Mexico City? Well, the USOC was paying the tab of the athletes so the athletes would win gold medals for them, not out of the goodness of their heart. But beyond that, that sounded to me almost like a plantation owner saying, we feed and clothe our darkies. What do they have to complain about because they're picking cotton 12 hours a day? And the point is, politics is always there. And the people who say to me, and probably say to you guys at times, I don't want politics to mix with sports, what they're really saying is, I don't like your politics.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we hear that.
No, they're telling you to shut up is what they're telling you to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just shut up and
stick to sports is the F you, in my, why don't you say F you and shut up? Or, telling me to stick to sports, that's just the clean way of saying that.
Right. Hey, John, you the connection to the politics in sports, you mentioned a guy that I have not thought about in 40 years. And as a little kid, I can remember probably in the Weekly Reader or whatever came around, reading about a guy named Avery Brundage and thinking at the time, something's a little off. And I don't know why I thought that, in Sister Dorothea Marie's class or whatever when the Weekly Reader came around. But you highlight three particular eras. You say 36, 68, and then 72. You touched on 68. Talk about Brundage and sort of his connection to this whole sports and politics thing.
Well, Avery Brundage mixed sports and politics more than any administrator ever, partly because he was in power for so long. But in 1936, he was the president of the United States Olympic Committee and played a major role. There was talk of not going to those Olympics in Berlin in the United States because it was becoming apparent who Adolf Hitler was at that point. And Brundage played a major role in convincing the government that the United States should go. When he got there, I don't know if you ever saw the Jesse Owens movie, but there's a scene in it that's absolutely true in which one of Hitler's guys, after Jesse Owens has won 2 or 3 gold medals, he ended up winning 4, as we know, says to Brundage, don't you dare bring that black-skinned person to meet the Fuhrer. I mean, don't you dare ask him to shake hands with the Fuhrer. And Brundage didn't. But beyond that, is the more famous incident, of course, is there were 2 Jewish runners on the 4x100 Olympic team, one of them being the great Marty Glickman, who went on to be one of the great broadcasters ever. And in order not to embarrass Hitler, Brundage pulled the 2 of them from the relay because he didn't want Hitler to have to watch Jewish runners. Then in 1968, when he was chairman of the International Olympic Committee, when Tommy Smith and John Carlos staged their salute with the black gloves, he threw them out of the Olympic movement and demanded their medals back. By the way, they never gave their medals back. They were told to show up at a certain time and place to return their medals, and they just never showed up. They both still have their medals, thank goodness. But he did that in 1968. And then in 1972, after the 11 Israelis were murdered. The next morning, during the memorial service for the Israelis, he said the games must go on. 11 Jews died, no big deal. That's who Avery Brundage was.
John Feinstein is our guest on behalf of Baltimore County Executive Don Moeller. We wanted to talk Anthem. We're going to get to golf, but obviously where the world is right now and your Twitter feed and our Twitter feed to veer off of sports, give me some thoughts of the last 6 weeks in this country, John. And I know you're out on Twitter. You weren't on Twitter a couple years ago. Some real-time thoughts of watching people scale the Capitol last month.
Well, it was terrifying. I mean, that day, January 6th, I can't say, my wife kept saying, oh my God, how could this possibly happen? And I said, well, it's easy to understand how this happened because Trump, it's not that Trump is right wing or anything. He's a cultist. If he told those people to drink poison Kool-Aid a la Jim Jones 40 years ago, they would, because they believe that he's something beyond a president or a politician. And he whipped them into this frenzy. Remember, he was tweeting before January 6th. We're meeting in Washington, January 6th. Let's get wild, his words. And then he said, I'm going to lead you to the Capitol, which of course he didn't because he's a coward, really. And what are these people going to think? We're supposed to storm the Capitol. And they did. And 5 people died. And it could have been worse. And even, Nestor, when it was over, that night when the people started leaving, Trump tweeted again, we love you, you're heroes, and this is what happens, I'm quoting, this is what happens when a sacred landslide election victory is stolen from you. Still perpetrating the myth. And what scares me, Nestor, is that those 73 million people who voted for him, most of them still think the election was stolen. Most of them still think that Joe Biden it should not be president. And I obviously disagree with that virulently.
Because there's no evidence to secure to
zero.
suggest anything else.
There were more than 100 lawsuits filed. More than 100. And the Supreme Court, which now leans way right because of Trump's 3 appointees, way right, wouldn't even hear the lawsuits they tried to bring to the Supreme Court in the hope that because 5 of the votes are totally right-wing, I think that the Chief Justice is a moderate. He's down, he saved Obamacare, 5-4 vote. I respect the heck out of him, even though he leans more right than I certainly do. But still, I think he's a moderate. We need more moderates in politics. But the point is, there has been not a scintilla of evidence that there was any problem with the way the votes were counted. And it's not like Trump lost by 100 votes. He lost by more than 6 million votes. It wasn't even close. And nor in the electoral count, 303 votes for Biden. But the point is, we are no less polarized now than we have been the last 4 years. The good difference is we do have a president. Just so you don't think it's just Democrat, Republican with me, I respected George W. Bush. I disagreed with him more often than not, but I respected him as someone who wanted to do what was best for the country. He made mistakes, in my view, but he wanted to do what was best for the country. Same with his father.
And John, you didn't doubt. I'm going to interrupt you because I use the Bushes all of the time as well, and you and I are pretty much contemporaries. I use Bush all the time.
Sure.
Disagreed with almost every one of his policies. But here's what I never questioned. I never questioned whether he was probably a good guy, a good husband, a good dad.
You never accused him of being a racist.
Somebody that would be a good neighbor. You didn't think of him as a racist. And I didn't doubt him when he stood with that bullhorn in the rubble of 9/11.
Right. And like you said, Don, he made mistakes as president. Every president makes mistakes. But I think that if you go back, all the presidents of my lifetime, Republican or Democrat until 2016, I believe made decisions that they thought were best for the country. Doesn't mean they were always right. In fact, they weren't. But when Donald Trump became president, all his decisions were made for what was best for Donald Trump. and his view of the world is sort of the classic white guy born on third base. You know, his father paved the way for him, and he never respected other people. That was we talked about Ryan Odom. Ryan Odom respects every single person who walks into a room, whether they're 5 years old or the president of the United States. And Donald Trump respects nobody.
John, I said incapable. Again, anyone that saw the town hall recently that the president did in Wisconsin. I said to my wife, you know, you and your wife are having these discussions. I said to my wife, that scene where Joe Biden leans down and says to that little girl, "We're going to take care of you, and we're going to take care of your mommy." Donald Trump, I'm not giving him a pass. He is incapable of that conversation.
Right.
Because that gene doesn't exist in him.
Right. Unless he thought there was some way to make money off it.
Unless he thought to make.
And that's the other thing. He is really, really dishonest. He's a very dishonest guy. I've known people. I was married to someone for 18 years who was a pathological liar. She believed her lies, but Donald Trump is just a liar. I mean, he just makes it up as he goes along. That's why it's good that they took him off of Twitter, because he'd have just kept perpetrating lies on Twitter if he hadn't been stopped somehow.
John, I don't want to keep going into this rabbit hole because I know Don's got 3 other topics for you, but I would just say this. The founders, because it kept coming back to the founders during the impeachment and Mitch McConnell and, just a game being played, quite frankly. The founders never saw massive sort of fraud like I don't think they could have ever have seen red versus blue, and we're going to see we're not going to call witnesses. I don't think the founders ever saw a government where Congress would say, well, we don't want any witnesses, we can't have that.
Well, there are all sorts of I've read that one of the reasons they didn't call witnesses is because the Republicans had threatened to filibuster if they did, and just basically shut the government down that way. But if you watch the case that was presented by the House lawyers, there's no doubt he should have been convicted in my mind. And 7 Republicans even voted for that, even though they're all still scared of Trump.
If you wanted to do what's best for the country, convicting him was the way to go.
The only reason it matters, Nestor, because part of me was saying, look, he's out of office. Let's just get him behind us as quickly as we can. But because he wasn't convicted, he can run for office again. And he can whip up all those crazy people again. If he'd been convicted, he couldn't run for office again. He'd also lose his Secret Service protection, which I'd have gotten a laugh out of. But that's why he should have been convicted. And that's why the 43 people who voted against convicting him, knowing that he was guilty, Mitch McConnell even said so, he's guilty, but they're cowards. And they may ultimately damage this country tremendously if he does, in fact, run again.
And they will be judged as cowards. And let's move on from 45 because he gives me a headache. Yeah, John, as my golf guru, good walk spoiled caddy for life, and I'm going to talk about caddy for life in a little bit as well because I have a special connection to ALS. But I want to see if my theory. I've been talking to my grandsons. I got one who really digs golf. He's 9 years old. He thinks he's going to be the next Bryson DeChambeau and hit it 500 yards.
Hope he plays faster.
Oh my Lord! I mean, can we at least find? Yeah, exactly right. But I want to talk about a guy that I really am fond of, and don't burst my bubble and tell me he's a jerk. I think Jordan Spieth appears to be the real deal. Nice kid, cares about his sister, just a nice guy. I expect if I ran into Jordan Spieth, he'd be a nice guy. I say to my grandsons the last couple of weeks, who also like Jordan Spieth, guys, once you haven't won on Sunday, it gets harder and harder to win on Sunday. And nobody has covered this sport closer than you have. Is it in Jordan's head now when he tees it up on Sunday that son of a gun, I'm going to shoot 1 or 2 over par and blow this 54-hole lead again?
Yes, it is in his head, but I think he'll get through it, Don. I think, golf is the most mental game we have. because nobody tries to stop you from doing what you need to do. Nobody throws a fastball at you 95. Nobody tries to tackle you, guard you, put you into the boards, serve a tennis ball 125. Ball just sits there. And you either get it in the hole fast enough or you don't. You don't get bad calls. You know, a lot of times guys will shoot 74 and they'll say, I caught the worst of the weather, or I got a bad hop on number 12 when the ball went out of bounds. When they go home that night and look in the mirror, they're looking at the guy who shot 74, who's responsible for the 74, nobody else. So yes, it's in his head, but I think his golf swing was in his head for a long time, and he's clearly progressed in that area the last 2 weeks. I think he will win again. I think he'll win a major again. I really do. He's only 27. And he clearly has all the talent to win again. And mentally, he's a strong guy. Now, as to whether I like him or not, I don't like him. I love him.
Well, now I feel better. There we go.
And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was working on the first major, my book on the Ryder Cup, Jordan was at the height of his dominant period, 2015. He'd won the Masters. He won the U.S. Open. He finished one shot out of the playoff at the British, and he finished second at the PGA. Outside of the Tiger Slam, nobody's had a run like that in majors in my lifetime, including Nicklaus, who never had 1 year or 4 straight tournaments like that. So it took me a while to set up my first interview with him because I didn't know him. I mean, he was 21 years old. He was brand new. And his agent, here's a shock, was kind of a pain in the neck. But I finally got to sit down with him, and he had to cancel our first scheduled meeting. And the first thing he said to me when we sat down, he said, hey, I'm really sorry about canceling a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. Something came up that I had to do. And I said, Jordan, no need to apologize. You're doing me a favor giving me this time, so please don't apologize. And he said to me, aren't you doing me a favor putting me in your book? Now, I've written 43 books, guys. I think that's been said to me maybe 5 times.
Messina and Glavin didn't say that to you.
Messina and Glavin did not say that to me, but they did talk to me.
They're nice guys.
That's all I can ask, but neither one of them said, oh, thank you so much for thinking of me. But Jordan did, and when we finished, we talked for about 2 hours. It was supposed to be an hour. We talked for 2. And at the end, I said, I'm going to want to circle back to you as we get closer to the Ryder Cup. Is that okay with you? And he said, yeah. He said, look, just take my cell phone number so you don't have to deal with Jay, his agent, Jay Danzy, and call me whenever you need me. I mean, how can you not like that guy?
There you go.
And he's completely honest. He always tells you what he actually said to me at one point. He said, there are times in press conferences where I will go politically correct on people just because I don't want to deal with the hassle of not. He said he was talking about how much he admired Rory because Rory never goes politically correct. And he was saying that this was later when you might remember a lot of the guys didn't go to the 2016 Olympics. They didn't like the Zika virus. They didn't like the timing, various reasons. And Jordan and Rory had their press conferences at the British Open on the same day. And Jordan went in the morning and he went through this whole thing. And he said, this is the toughest decision I've ever had to make. I hope to play in the Olympics someday, blah, blah. Rory came out and said, it wasn't that hard a decision. I don't think of the Olympics. When I think of the Olympics, I don't think of golf. I think of swimming. I think of track and field. I really don't think of golf. And he got blasted for that, of course, by the golf media. How dare you say that about golf? And Jordan told me he was watching with several friends when Rory had his press conference, and somebody turned to him and said, you need to send him a really good bottle of wine because he's going to be the headline today, not you. And Jordan was saying, that he admired Rory because Rory never went politically correct. And I admired Jordan for at least being honest enough to say that sometimes he does.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that you think he'll work through it because you see, and again, I do think time is on his side. He's only 27.
Right.
And I agree with you. I think his swing looks like he's got the swing part, at least on the way back. I know you have to run. I was going to ask you about Bruce Edwards. We'll come back and do that another time because I don't want to give it short shrift. But before we get out of here, John, I was intrigued by a little project you're involved in called Story Time. And I don't know that enough people know about it. So I want you to take a moment or two and tell folks about Story Time and why they should know about it.
Well, I agree with you, Don, that more people should know about it. A friend of mine, Chris Ryan, and I launched this a couple months ago. It started from when the pandemic first began. A lot of people who follow me on Twitter said, how would you feel about like every morning just telling us a story from your career, an anecdote? And I started doing a daily anecdote, and it was stuff that wasn't in my book, stuff that I hadn't said publicly or behind the scenes story. And people loved it. People were like, "Oh, these are great stories. You
It's your
need to
little
do
Paul
more."
Harvey, right, Lake?
Right?
Your little Paul Harvey, right?
The rest of the story.
Yeah.
And so Chris Ryan, a friend of mine who lives nearby, who I played golf with for years, who's far more technically capable than I am, which is almost anybody in the world, said, "Why don't we do these as videos? Sit in front of a fireplace right here in my office and tell a story." And so we started putting them together. They come out 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They're all different. I did one the other day about my dear friend Tom Konchalski, who passed away last week, who was the greatest high school, college basketball scout that ever lived. And ask any coach, they will tell you the exact same thing. And I've done them on John McEnroe, Mike Krzyzewski, Gary Williams, anybody you want to name, and also on some not so famous people. I did one on how I almost got arrested in Czechoslovakia, trying to interview Michael Pavanka's mother. You might remember Michael Pavanka played for the Caps for 12 years. I was there the week he happened to defect because I was there covering the Fed Cup when Martina Navratilova returned to Czechoslovakia. It is an amazing story, not because of me, just because of the circumstances. But anyway, if people are interested, they can go to my website, which is jfeinsteinbooks.com, and there's a link, and it's $2 a month for 12 story times a month. Or if you want some extra benefits that we give people, like a once a month Zoom call with me, it goes up to as high as $8 a month. But the reaction to it, Don, has been great. People love the stories. They love the fact that my 10-year-old daughter does the intro and the outro. The outro is great because she says, "My dad also writes books, and some of them are good."
That reminds, kids tell like it is, don't they, John? We had former governor and mayor Martin O'Malley on, who's written a phenomenal book on government called Smart Government. It's for anybody that wants to understand how government should work, needs to read Governor O'Malley's book, Smart Government. And he said one of his sons, when the book came out and the publisher sent it home, his son picked up the book and said, "Dad, who reads this stuff?" He said, he said it always brings you back down to earth.
Well, I'll tell you one quick story about that, Don, because we do have to go. But my oldest son, Danny, who's now 27, has maybe read one or two of my books. I've written 43 in all. Never read any of my kids' books when he was a kid, even though he was very much part of my writing them. And I said to him one time, "Danny, why don't you read more of my books? Some of them are pretty good." And, I've started reading them at times. And the problem is, whenever I'm reading one of your books, I can hear your voice. And it's really annoying.
No love at home, right? No love. I can remember around the dinner table, I'd be an area superintendent or the county executive, and people would be, I said, people at work actually respect my opinion. I'm sure you feel it.
Well, sometimes when my wife is telling me to shut the hell up, I say, there are people who pay thousands of dollars to hear me talk. And she says, "I'm not one of them."
There you go.
She's not the $2 subscriber.
No way.
John, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on and taking a walk with us and talking some UMBC and certainly some America. And hopefully we'll fist bump, elbow bump somewhere post-shot. Hope you get your shots.
Yep.
And we can have something normal before 2021's over, okay?
I hope so, too. I'm hoping that we can have a summer. I'd like to spend this part of the summer in Camden Yards and be out at ball games again on a regular basis.
I'm just hoping to be courtside with you and Odom next, let's say, November, December at some point, right? Something normal and indoor.
Yeah.
If we can get to that, we're in pretty good shape, I think.
Hey, John, you're up at UMBC. I'll have my my brother who's a member over there at Rolling Road. We'll grab you one day and we'll tee it up over there at Rolling Road when you're up near UMBC.
I'll tell you what, Don, I'll make you a deal. You guys grab me. You go tee it up. I'll sit at the bar.
That's where I'll be. That's where I'll sit at
the bar and wait for you guys.
All righty.
I'll tell you this going out. My brother is an absolute fanatic golfer. He only plays on days that end in Y. He's a 1 or 2 handicap. And a few years back, he said to me, you got to start playing more golf. You know, let's make a deal. Every Tuesday, we'll meet at 4:00. We're both members at Congressional. We'll play 9 holes and we'll have dinner together. And I said, that sounds good. So we met right after Labor Day, beautiful September afternoon. And we play 9 holes. And at the end of the 9 holes, he says to me, he says, God, it's such a beautiful afternoon. Let's play a few more holes. I said, you're right. It is a beautiful afternoon. Let's have our first drink outside. He says, no, come on, let's play a few more holes. And I said, you go play a few more holes. I'll go have a drink. And I realized that's what I like best about golf is the first drink.
You like that 19th hole, huh?
I learned that early on that I do not like golf. I've tried it. There's other things going on.
I like golf, Nestor, but it's never liked me.
See you later, John. We're not going to lose any more golf balls here. On behalf of former Baltimore County Executive Don Moeller and John Feinstein, I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking. Baltimore, positive.